Music, art, drama, historical presentations, all of which give depth and understanding to what the classics are to not only our own institution, but to civilization in the Western world. Built in the 1960s as a result of a contribution from Maria and Kostas Maliotis, the Maliotis Cultural Center was built with the mission of advancing Greek culture and language.
It is Kostas and Mary's Maliotis' home. Under this home, the whole homogenia is getting served with different kinds of activities and events.
3 years ago, Helena College Holy Cross was able to regain control of the operations of the facility. We then commenced a very intentional 3 to 5 year plan to renovate the facility that had fallen into significant disrepair.
The Maliotis Cultural Center is a beautiful 2-story building clad in all-white Pentelic marble, the same marble that was used on the Parthenon. The atrium is tall and spacious, yet welcoming. It is the perfect place to host an exhibit, a conference, or a lecture. With a seating capacity of 340, our theater can hold musical performances, Greek tragedies, conferences, seminars, and so much more.
We're here in front of the brand new LED wall, which was one of the many major capital improvements we've made to this facility this past year, both externally and internally.
We were then able to use the facility for our students in ways that it had not been used before. As a virtual student center, including its use as classrooms, a location for student events, a casual library, and actually even a cafeteria.
The library is one of my favorite places at the Cultural Center. It's so cozy and warm. It has a great atmosphere. It's just a great place to grab a book or a cup of coffee, study, hang out with friends. There's no place like it. Don't forget to stop by the Maliotis Cafeteria. It's like a little corner of Greece right here in Boston.
I'm really excited seeing the center creating affiliations with local universities like Harvard, BU, BC Fletcher. It's amazing that we have been able to create affiliations with Benaki Museum and Gennadios Library.
It's exciting for me to see so many people on a daily basis visit the facility, not just the students that are here on campus, as well as the faculty and staff. But every day there's an event, there's permanent exhibits here, there's ongoing activity, both as not only as a social area, but also important as a place of holding meetings, dances, all types of cultural events and activities.
It's such a blessing and joy coming on the center on a daily basis.
Music,
I feel like there is a
art,
purpose
drama,
and ethos.
historical presentations.
The center
all
is
of which
full of
give
life
depth
from
and
8 o'clock in the morning
to what the
until
classics
10
are
p.m.
to not
in the
only our
evening.
own institution. We have developed relationship with presenters both in New York and Athens to continue to grow and broaden our offerings.
We truly need the full support of our entire community. We've only scratched the surface of how great this place can be as a vibrant Hellenic cultural center for not only us here in the community, but for all over the world. And so we look forward to people coming here, visiting us, really experiencing what truly makes us Hellenes.
His Eminence, Archbishop Elpidophoros, refers to Maliotis Cultural Center as Κόμβος Ελληνισμού και Μελής Ορθοδοξίας, the center of Hellenism and Orthodoxy.
Cultural centers are not only an important asset for us to preserve the past, but also to perpetuate the future.
I want to believe that Kostas and Mary Maliotis, they are proud how we continued their legacy.
Our vision is to be seen as not only the cultural center of campus, or of Boston, or of New England for that matter, but of the entire United States, to be the starting point of national tours. Our potential is endless.
It is a great pleasure to have with us tonight the leadership group of the Gennadios Library and the American School of Classic Studies at Athens, looking at George Orfanakos. I see, first of all, I have to say, Yorgo, the chair of Maliotis. I would like, with all the respect, to start that George Orfanakos, he has been involved with Maliotis Cultural Center from the day one. I will never forget that he was stopping by, he was listening to us, he was giving us advices, and right now it's very emotional to us seeing George here as the chair of Maliotis Cultural Center and also as the executive director of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. I would like to ask George to come forward and introduce the rest of the group. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. We have to give a round of applause to Chrysula for everything that she does and has done.
And actually, I would like to say a big thank you to everybody who came tonight, and especially στον κύριο Γιώργο Kopoulos, who is the vice chair of our Omospondia. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a joy to be with all of you tonight, and we're happy that you took the time to come here. We have a really special evening to talk about a traveling exhibit that we're launching now across the country. It's called In the Name of Humanity. Before we do that, I think it's important just to take 2 minutes to see the institution that has put this information together. It's called the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, and just watch this short clip, and I'll be back to introduce our guest speakers and panelists.
If you're interested in mankind, if you're interested in society and how it should function, then you would do well to study the past.
There are certain moments in history where the human spirit bubbles up and goes.
Whether we're talking about democracy, art, philosophy, it doesn't really matter what the subject is. It begins in Greece.
We are the premier overseas research center studying Hellenism from prehistoric times to the present day.
We're a consortium of almost 200 leading academic institutions in the United States.
There's hardly a part of Greece that some American school project is not operated in.
Through advances in science, the school has suddenly been transformed.
We can now tell not only what a person had in his last meal, but where he lived.
All of that information can really be disseminated to new audiences.
Through exhibitions, scholarly presentations.
An extended program of outreach to the world community at large.
We bring Greece's past to life to really help shape the world's tomorrow.
This is what we've been doing for almost 140 years. This is who we are.
So the American School is a 143-year-old institution. Main campus is in Kolonaki, Athens, and if you're ever there, please come and take a visit. But we're delighted to have the opportunity to come here this evening to Maliotis. For me, it's a coming home, as I went to school here. And as Chrysula said, I currently have the honor to serve as the chair of the Board of Overseers, of which we have several tonight with us. And please give them a round of applause, too, because of the tremendous work that we have. Tonight, what we're going to show you in full disclosure is we've put together this an amazing exhibit and a conversation. This is a dialogue tonight. We're going to share with you. These are just a few of the panels that we have. There's over 24 that are part of the exhibit, and we're going to be taking them up as you tell us at the end. And to do that, I'm delighted to have some of my friends and colleagues that are here with us. I want to first introduce Maria Georgopoulou, the director of the Gennadios Library. And I'm excited that she's here with us. Eleftheria Delaziou, who's here with us, archivist from the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. We'll put you on the end, and we'll put Andreas in the middle. And Andrea Zobanakis, the chair of our board of overseers, trustee of the American School, you know, and a tremendous leader, and we're just excited to have all three of you. They were here this week as part, well, they were here for our board meetings that we have, but they were also took part in a conference down in Princeton University. We did the full exhibit yesterday as a dry run up in Rye, New York. So we're gonna, you know, wake up a little bit, and we're excited to be here today, and we are delighted to share this story with you. One of the things we're going to just, as we get started, and we have our mics on.
The Gennadios Library was founded in 1922 to house the collection, the book collection of a Greek who was ambassador in England for many years in the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. And his 30,000 book collection is a collection that is about the history of Hellenism from the end of antiquity to the present. So this is Ioannis Gennadios. So the books are wonderful, they're rare, and they really talk about and tell us very much about the history of Greece in a very sort of broad sense, from the Caucasus to Spain, and from Moscow to the Sudan. So we have some amazing materials, the first printed edition of Homer, and many other books that are really wonderful to see. When you have a collection like this, you want to share it with the world. I mean, it was not his intention, and it's not our intention to have these things only in closed sort of spaces, but the Gennadios has become a center for the study of the history of Greece after the end of antiquity. It's the second library of the American School, and it's a library that has grown now to about 150,000 books. The library, in any library, is populated and lives through young people, I mean, through scholars. We have one of our alumni here tonight, Alexandra Bourko, who was with us last year.
Bravo.
Thank you very much for coming, Alexandra. We miss you this year. And she saw one of her friends from last year on the screen, so Kutai. So we have fellowships that have grown, and it's really important for us to have a very vivid and important program that grows. We have public programming, we have exhibitions, we have lectures, concerts, the Potamianos lecture series that brings important scholars to speak in Greece and the US about the impact of Hellenism throughout history.
Sorry. There we go.
And concerts, and this is Christopher King, who is an amazing American who is infatuated and in love with Greek folk songs, and so it's as you can imagine a very vibrant institution, and one that really wants to bridge the scholarly world with the Athenian audience, and through, of course, virtual and live streaming, all of our events can be shared with the world. So we look forward to seeing you in Athens and to bring to you this amazing project tonight.
Right. So one of the things, thank you, Maria. One of the things that it's really important to understand, the American School was built, endowed not by Greek America, by Americans that loved Greece. And that's a major play. When I first joined the school in 2015, I said, I don't want to work for Greeks anymore. I'm good. You know, I'm a Greek American, I can say that. And then I looked at the trustee list and I was like, I don't know any of these people. What's going on here? And that's sort of the beauty of, I mean, it is at the heart of the school, that even though we have Yorgopoul, Leftheria, Andrea, you're seeing, you know, probably the minority there of people that are part of the American School. It's fascinating, and a lot of big Boston names too, I'd say. So it's really powerful. Now, just we're gonna jump into this. I wanted to give you sort of the background about it, and we're gonna start with the In the Name of Humanity exhibit. Now, Andreas was a big proponent of this, the exhibit as the chair of the overseers and driving as the trustees, and really, it's a story that's largely been forgotten. So Andreas, tell us, how that started for you.
Okay. So we had a bunch of very important anniversaries recently. So we had the anniversary of the bicentennial of the Greek War of Independence. So that was in 21. In 22, we had the anniversary of the Μεγάλη Καταστροφή, of the big catastrophe of Smyrna. And then in 23, we had the anniversary of the Treaty of Lausanne, which resulted in the big population exchanges that this is all about. So these were anniversaries that were celebrated throughout Greece, from villages to the big museums. And we wanted to find things that were somehow relevant to us as an American institution in Greece. So we celebrated the Greek War of Independence with a very nice exhibition that Maria curated on Americans that fought in the Greek War of Independence. Samuel Gridley Howe, the chief surgeon of the Greek Navy, a Bostonian that went to Brown and whatever.
Whose home, I think, is currently owned by one of our trustees in Boston.
Yeah, by coincidence.
We'll all go there for cocktails afterwards.
Then we mourned, in a way, the loss of Smyrna, of the Greek population in Smyrna, with a fantastic exhibition that was curated by the archives, because we have the archives of the so-called generation of the 30s, who were probably the most important group of writers. We also have the 2 Nobel Prize winners, and how the catastrophe was viewed through their eyes. And then, what were we going to do here? And somehow I just stumbled on one of these posters. And it was kind of curious, they shall not perish, American Committee, blah, blah, blah. And as I looked into it, it was like peeling the layers of an onion, because there were all these stories that I had never heard before. And I began to try and persuade people that we should really do this. And it turned out to be a good decision, because we just learned more and more and more about a story that's been forgotten. So that's the genesis of all this.
And what's great is we've done the conversation, not the exhibit, in various cities, and every single time I think we can attest that it's the audience that also turns around and enlightens through their experiences and their parents or grandparents, and tells us something that we had heard of but didn't really know. So if this touches you in some way tonight, you're going to be able to speak at the end. To really bring it, make it even more special. So let's get into the story. Eleftheria, can you set the stage for us? Who's involved? What's happening? What situation at the time in Greece?
So we have to start right during the Great War, 1914. America joined the war in 1917, but before that, there were needs. There were needs in Europe. There were needs in the Near East. There were American relief organizations which immediately were sent to Europe and the Near East to help people, refugees, deported people, orphans. Our story, the story of our narration, begins in 1918, because it was then when the American Red Cross arrived in Greece after the call of the Greek Red Cross. Greek people needed help, and the Americans arrived in 1918. Fast forward, August 1922. The Greek army is defeated in Asia Minor. The Asia Minor disaster happens. And American relief organizations stationed either in Constantinople or in Smyrna itself come to help the Greek Anatolians. The people who are in Smyrna, the fire starts right after that. The Turkish forces are in the city, and the people have to escape. It was a great humanitarian disaster, and this is when American relief organizations come and provide what we call the Smyrna emergency relief.
Okay, now when you're talking about we have some young people here, which are great. So you're talking about you had these right? You had a multicultural situation. You had Greeks, Armenians, Turks living side by side, and other minorities living together. And all of a sudden, we called the population exchange. They were told, like now, if I told you get home, get your stuff, and you're out, and you're never going to turn around, and all of a sudden, you know, all your friends, all your iPads, everything. It's all gone, okay? And you never, you know, you may not ever see it again and go. And all of a sudden you end up and say, where do I go? What do I do? And then you're alone. And then you have to figure out what do you do? And imagine, I'm looking at you as a teenager or whatever you are, you know, but imagine you're married or kids or you're older and you're starting over. This is kind of the scenario. But here's the deal. You end up going to Greece. What was Greece like? How many people were there? And how many people came in?
Well, the population of Greece back then was almost 5 million people.
Hold on, can we raise her volume a little bit, please? Go ahead, yeah.
And we had 1.2 million people, refugees, arriving in Greece right after the Asia Minor disaster.
And were they was Greece wealthy at the time? Were they ready to receive 1.2 million? Did they have an infrastructure? I mean,
we have to remember that Greece had been through wars continuously since the Balkan Wars, 1912, 1913, the Great War, then the Asia Minor War.
Okay, so now you have the Asia Minor refugees. They're told to go. It wasn't easy to get out, but there were two key figures that played a role in that. Can you talk about them?
Two people, Asia Jennings, the YMCA secretary in Smyrna. He was the man of the hour. He was actually the man who orchestrated the departure, let's say, of thousands of Greeks, Anatolian Greeks, who were trying to escape Smyrna. He orchestrated their departure. He was the one who sent ships to Smyrna from Greece to get the population out, to get the people out.
And he moved without authority, right? It was just instinctively. Go ahead, yeah. Go ahead. Add some color here because it's important, and it's interesting to the New Englanders here because I think he ended up in New Hampshire. But yeah.
No. I'm just saying that he had just recently arrived.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he was pushed to action, or he was encouraged to action by somebody else, right?
Well, actually, this man, George Horton, the U.S. consul in Smyrna, he, a great philhellene and a great writer as well, he saved also many Anatolian Greeks. He was the one who issued travel documents, permits that enabled many people to evacuate the city. This was done until the last hours of his staying in the city because he was called by the American government to evacuate.
Mm-hmm. So you got these two people doing Herculean tasks and really standing up for people that had needed help. But that whole idea of perspective, I think, is really important here. Andreas, as I said, is a chair of overseers and a trustee. He's also a numbers guy. Even though he went to school in Harvard, we went to his alma mater today. I'm a Hellenic College guy, so we're here. I'm proud of that. But let's get into some of the numbers and focus in on that 30 million and tell us what that means today.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So just to add to what Eleftheria said, the thing to remember is official American policy was neutrality. So these people went against orders. Even the captains of the Navy ships went against their orders to save these people. Right. So anyway, an aside. So, okay.
You're seeing all these sub-stories that standing up for people that have nothing, speaking when you can go.
So, okay, this is to try and impress you, okay? So, and then I think we're going to get into detail in all these things. So, Yeah, 1.2 million refugees come in the space of a few months, a country that's on its knees. And it's on its knees actually also because the dominant political idea, which was the Μεγάλη Ιδέα, that, you know, they'd unite all the Greek-speaking people around Anatolia, just collapses. And suddenly, you know, Greece is in a political vacuum to add to everything else, the poverty, the war that had just been lost. So that's one thing. The 30 million is the money that was raised. I don't know if you saw it, you remember from an earlier poster.
You might want to point out that Anatolia is what is now Turkey.
Yeah.
And Asia Minor, historically, it's been known by two names, either Asia Minor or Little Asia, because it was that very large peninsula that is now in the mainland of Turkey, or Anatolia, which is derived from the Greek word for the east.
Quite right.
You know, when you talk about Anatolia in Greece, people, those who are unfamiliar with Greece may be wondering, who the hell are they?
Fair enough.
Right.
So
now I'm scared he's going to be correcting me.
No, that's fine. No,
we're good. That's what's a dialogue.
We can stand our ground. So so 30 million was the money that was raised by the Near East Relief in the space of a few months. Now, 30 million in 1923 dollars is close to, it's depending how you calculate it, to about $750 million. So it's a huge number. And and it's still, I think, the biggest private humanitarian relief in American history. It's never been surpassed. So we'll learn more about it, but I think what's most important is this money was raised in the churches, largely in Protestant churches. It wasn't big amounts of money by big corporations or billionaires. This was just normal people all around America giving small amounts of money.
They all, may I just, because we mentioned it yesterday, and I think it flows here. They also had some unique fundraising strategies. You want to talk about that?
We'll get into it because I think we're going to spend some time on.
Right.
So the you're in what's the other one?
Orphans.
So the Orphans Saved. So the Near East Relief brought 18,500 orphans to Greece. 18,500 orphans. This number's huge. And then the other thing we'll hear about today is these amazing American women who were doctors who built 23 hospitals in Greece at a time when, you know, Greek healthcare wasn't very sophisticated. So these are basic numbers just to impress you, but we're going to get into the detail as we go along.
Thank you, Andreas. Maria, so let's focus in now. Let's go to the American Red Cross and its work, and then the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, our school. How does that connect?
Well, when, as Eleftheria said, when the Greek Red Cross asked for help, the president of the United States, I mean, Woodrow Wilson, picked a friend who knew Greece to head this commission of the Red Cross that came to Greece. And this man was Edward Capps, a classicist, a professor at Princeton, who also happened to be the president of the managing committee of the American School. So you have here, I mean, somebody who obviously is interested and knows Greece, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So Edward Capps becomes, like many other members of the Red Cross, becomes a general and a soldier overnight. I mean, he was too old to be to go to war, but he steps in. Of course, he's a classicist, so he uses his connections to figure out things about Greece. And these are the people in the American School. The director of the American School, Bert Hodge-Hill, and the assistant director, Carl Blagian, a famous archaeologist. So this is a moment that is extremely important and something that is important to understand, that the people, the archaeologists, the classicists who were members of the American school knew the language, had contacts, and knew the ground. And they were the first ones to help and to explore the region. And of course, the American Red Cross is also about nurses, about help. And this woman who is circled there, her name is Heyman, Haleman. She inspired Ernest Hemingway as a figure in his great book about World War I. So a very, very important involvement of the Red Cross as the refugees first arrived in Greece. But...
You go ahead and let me go through.
No.
Iki. Okay, so we're going to get in.
Wait, maybe we talk about the campaign?
But they leave.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. We talk about that now? So you have American Red Cross does, right? Does urgent need.
Emergency relief.
Emergency.
Yes.
So, and then all of a sudden, what happened? When did they leave? What?
Well, and the Red Cross, they leave. So it's the moment where, in fact, other organizations need to come in and fill the gap. Because Greece is trying, of course, as much as it can to stand on its feet. But it's the nearest relief, it's the American women's hospitals, and different organizations within Greece, I mean, American organizations who step up.
All right, so Theria, talk about that. You just mentioned the hospitals. Talk about the women doctors and nurses and how they help the refugees.
Well, this is a story that has to be remembered, but has been forgotten in Greece. The American Women's Hospitals was an organization created in 1917 in the States in order to make it easier for American women nurses and doctors to join the war front. However, after the end of the war, these women thought that it would be best to stay, to remain either in Europe, in the Balkans, or in the Near East to help and assist in whatever they could do. The American Women's Hospitals is one of the organizations which arrived in Smyrna and helped with the Smyrna emergency relief. And soon after that, they realized that they were needed in Greece as well because of the refugees. I think one of the most successful stories, besides the creation of all these hospitals, the health clinics, was the creation of a quarantine station on an island, on a rocky island off the coast of Attica, a deserted, uninhabited island with no running water or buildings. They established a quarantine station there where almost 12,000 people were treated because they had contagious diseases like malaria, typhus. They suffered from dengue fever, and they were not allowed to join the other refugees in the mainland. Exactly because they had these diseases. So these people were treated there, whole families were there. And they established clinics and hospitals on this rocky island. For 6-7 months, they treated more than 12,000 people.
And there was no water.
Macronissus, off the coast of Attica.
Now, you mentioned that the women,
no running water.
You mentioned today the women doctors. I thought that was that they came to help, but they were not employable. They were not employing them in America or something at the time. What was?
No.
Tell me what you were sharing.
The
something.
thing is that these women thought that they would best serve the people, where they were needed, the refugees, the orphans.
So responding to a desperate need.
That's the other
This is another legacy of the American women's hospitals. They established a nursing school. One of their greatest legacies, this has to be said, they maintained it in Coquignan, and it was under the direction of Dr. Ruth Parmalee. She was a very well-known medical worker. She was actually a doctor who worked in the Near East before that, in Asia Minor, in many cities. The nursing school was an important story in Greece's attempt to find her steps again, its steps again. They educated young women in nursing, and they were employable. It was a way to empower these women, to empower these young girls, the refugees.
Great. We talk about, there's so many different elements. We mentioned Edward Capps. That's a photo of Edward Capps, and one of the things I love about the history of the American school, as I learned to study it, was that there are various moments in history where the trained classes, or the heart of the academic program of the school stopped what they were doing to help the people of Greece. Whether it was Edward Capps at this time, Hetty Goldman, I think, became a nurse as well. It's another archaeologist. You have it over time, but I'm proud to share that in addition to that, even as late as most recently as 2015 with the Syrian refugee crisis, our students continued that legacy. And I think that's really important because they don't just study Greece, but they truly love the people of Greece and rise to the occasion. Okay, so let's move forward. Now these refugees need to earn a living. How do you do that, Maria? What are they supposed to do now?
Yes, obviously, and I think this is one of the greatest legacies of the American humanitarian intervention, is the fact that subventions are okay, but you actually, when you have refugees, you need to empower them, you need to make them feel good about themselves again and self-sustained. And the Americans actually had 2 workshops, embroidery workshops in Athens, and they would sort of offer work to women, and it's extremely important that some of the women were given sewing machines at home, so they could work from home, so if they had young kids, babies, they could really make a living. And the whole...
That's the panel behind you, I think, right?
That is the panel behind me,
Yes.
yes. So they learned embroidery, they created wonderful pieces, and these were sold in Athens, they were sold on ships, and eventually they came back to the United States. So this is the American Friends of Greece refugee embroideries. So a very important legacy. And one which, as you see, is created, wonderful, wonderful products. And I wanted to say something here, because when you have an exhibition, in order to put together an exhibition, you need to have something that is at the very core, that is something that nobody else has, right? And these embroideries were actually being collected by members of the trustees. These embroideries are part of April Micha's collection. April is the wife of a very important trustee of the American School and the Gennadios Library, who unfortunately passed a couple of years ago. But you see these wonderful artifacts. And then the second kind of material, which is extremely, wonderful and quite adorable, and we have a specimen there for you to look at afterwards, are these dolls. And these dolls were started to be made in the 20s, but in the 30s, they became so sought after, so much sought after in the U.S. that really they are a trademark of these workshops. These are dolls that are sort of come from different parts of Greece. There's a Penelope and Odysseus. There are also dolls that you see a Turkish woman or a Muslim woman who is covered. And these actually, as I said, really made it had an impact. And these dolls are also one of the reasons that we had this exhibition, that Jack Davis, one of a very famous archaeologist and director of the American School 10, 15 years ago, started buying these dolls. He stumbled upon them. He started buying them on eBay. And he bought 70 of them that he has given to the American School, to the archives. And then a second collection of dolls was given to the school a little bit later. So it's quite interesting.
I think as beautiful as these are, as remarkable, and to see these things, the thing that pulls at your heartstrings is the psychology behind the refugee movement here. And you heard the women went to work, the women did this, the women did that. Well, where were the men? Talk about that psychology and what, and you know, you talk about,
okay.
yeah, because I think this is really important to the power of women and the impact.
So Wilson sends Henry Morgenthau, who was the ambassador to the port, to the Ottomans, to Greece to report now on the refugees. So he publishes a book in 1929 that's entitled I Went to Athens. I was in Athens.
I was sent to Athens.
I was sent to Athens. In it, he describes the fact that it was the women that kept their families alive. The men were so traumatized by the loss of their homeland, their dignity, their whatever, that it was basically the women that did everything they could to keep their families alive, you know, as housekeepers, as, you know, whatever. And I think that's something you see in just about every refugee population. It's always the women. So I find that a particular part of the story very moving, but also very apposite to what's going on today. Yeah.
I think I'm going to pause for one little visual I'm going to give you. You know, exhibitions, you expect to come to something like this and to be educated and to, you know, read and to understand and to go back. That's what you came here for, to go look in the past. One of the greatest movies I ever saw was Good Will Hunting, Boston-based. How many of you have seen it? Okay, there's a famous scene there where Robin Williams on a park bench in Boston, right, with Matt Damon, and they're sitting there together and they're talking, and he's trying to get Matt Damon to really kind of connect and see where he's lacking and where he's missing. And he looks over at him and he says, you know, if I tell you about if I say Sistine Chapel, you're going to tell me when it was built, when it was painted, the dynamics, this and that. If I say something else, you're going to give me every fact you know. But you can't tell me what it feels like. This exhibition is not just about knowledge. If you came here today just to hear a story and to get knowledge, this is about a feeling and understanding a psychology. This is also about personalizing it, because, you know, this story doesn't live in the past. It really very much is in our own lives. That if in fact we face obstacles and we face crossroads and things don't go our way, for those of you, you know, I was always told that you will survive because it's in your DNA, right? You will survive. That's what tonight is about. So let's go forward. Let's go to the relief humanitarian aid, Andreas, goes into American business deals. Okay, so you're not talking about only philanthropy, you're talking about these unique moments. So let's talk about the next couple slides, the Marathon Dam and.
So I think this can be a bit cynical if it's seen as a quid pro quo. You know, that we gave you aid, you give us business. That wasn't really the story behind all this. So this is the Marathon Dam. So in the 1920s in Athens, no source of drinking water, regular drinking water. And so the government decides to build a dam. They have a tender. It's won by Yulin. And the picture isn't very clear, but you have the most amazing dam, all built with white Pandelic marble, which is fantastic. And next to it, you have a replica of the treasury of the Delphians
Of the Athenians.
Of the Athenians in Delphi. The Athenians in Delphi. So that was one thing. So, and to this day, that's the principal source of drinking water in Athens. Right? Oh, here it is.
Yes.
See, Pandelic marble. It's really extraordinary. Anyway, keep going.
That's the inauguration.
Right. So this is the draining of the marshes in eastern Thrace and Macedonia. So Greece had a terrible problem with malaria. So the draining of the marshes, which was very fashionable in those days, Mussolini drained all the marshes around Rome and created a lot of farmland, which was important also for another reason, which was one of the drivers of the population exchange, especially for Greece, was that they had won through diplomacy and war all these new territories in the north of Greece that were not populated with Greeks. So there was a lot of land grants given to these people. They populated the region so it would become solidly Greek. So that's the story behind the draining of the marshes. And then the third part of the story, which go.
Yes, the third part of the story has to do with the Gennadios Library. It so happened that the deal that Ioannis Gennadios gave his collection of books to the American School in 1922. And it was at that time, just before the catastrophe, the disaster of Smyrna, that the American School had applied for money to the Carnegie Corporation, and this is how the building was built. And I wanted to really showcase this particular photograph, which is for me one of the most sort of moving photographs and things that we have in the exhibition. This is the Thanksgiving dinner that was offered to the workmen who actually built the Gennadios Library. This is in 1923, November of 1923. We have all the accounts, and we know that for 70 people, they paid $23.60 for the Thanksgiving dinner. It's also extremely important that they say that the workmen were so happy, obviously because they ate well, but also because they knew and they understood that the winter of 1924 was going to be better than the previous winter. This is to make us understand that all of these projects actually employed refugees, employed people who actually otherwise wouldn't have work. This was a very sort of difficult time in Greece. There were strikes and so on and so forth. But it is this amazing sort of opportunity that is actually that the refugees are given, and also that their own work really makes Greece sort of stand up on its feet again.
Now, let's also transition, talk about education and the schools that were founded and operated in the Ottoman Empire by the American Protestant missionaries. What happened to those schools, and were the government and the church supportive of those efforts? Did they move over to Greece, basically?
Yes, and I mean, I think this is a very important chapter which shows to emphasize these private schools run by missionaries, many of them, and most of them, I think, from Boston, at least from New England, who had founded these schools to educate Christians in the Ottoman Empire. And 3 of these schools continue to function after 100 years in Greece. This is the girls' school, the American School for Girls in Smyrna, which came to in 1922, 1923, was moved to Athens and still exists, a premier institution for women. And these schools were private, but they would actually give fellowships and scholarships. They would help refugees, and this was very important. The American Farm School up in Thessaloniki was, can you change the slide? Was a school that was founded in 1904 to help young men understand and appreciate how to use modern methods and techniques for agriculture. Again, an amazing foundation school that still exists. And the third school is Anatolia College, which moved from Merziphon, where it had been founded in the 19th century to educate Christians, moved to Thessaloniki in 1923 and became a premier institution. They were originally sort of given a piece of a building in the middle of Thessaloniki, and then they bought their own sort of building. And of course, along with these schools, the YMCA and the YWCA were really these important organizations and institutions that came in to help at this stage.
Including the first basketball team in Greece.
Or so they say.
In this, you know, if you read the exhibit, if you read, you know, the narrative and stuff like that, you often refer to these folks as Ottoman Greeks. And who were the Ottoman Greeks, and is there a difference between them and the Greek Americans that were here? And, you know, how were they received? Was it just sort of new brethren, or were they, go ahead.
Even before the Smyrna catastrophe, Armenians and Greeks were persecuted in Anatolia, in Asia Minor. So there were many of them who emigrated to the States. When they arrived, they had to say that, you know, they were their nationality. They were many of them responded that they were Ottoman Greeks, and many of them also used the same term when they entered after the Asia Minor disaster, the States. They were people who arrived in the States. They had already formed their own communities. They had their own communities. They formed their own communities in the States. They tried to raise money for their people in Asia Minor and after the Asia Minor disaster for the refugees in Greece. There were people who tried to make a living and a new life here in the States. And the thing is that they differentiated themselves from the Greek Americans. They had their own churches, they had their own associations.
So they spoke the same language, many of them, but they were received differently. And the churches, I know, were definitely split in many different ways. So Andreas, you know, the last thing of the exhibit that really touches on, which I think is really incredible, is music. And we had Christopher King, who actually participated, who was here a couple weeks ago, and gave a presentation, and he contributed to this exhibit as well. But talk about music and the exhibition and the influence these Asia Minor refugees had on the growth of the recording industry at that time.
So are you going to show the slide?
Yep.
Okay.
I want to move it. Sorry.
Oh, right. So King has done a lot of research on this topic. King's a bit bizarre because he's from West Virginia. And he's become a huge collector of these Greek 78s. So his research, and he lives now in Konitsa up in Epirus. And his research shows that in the decade of the 1920s, 16% of all records sold in America were Greek. Now, that's a completely disanalogous number to the proportion of Greeks in America. So there had been an attempt by record companies, big record companies, to come up with a generic Greek music. But that fell on its face because everyone wanted their own local music. And of course, musicians would come from Greece to play for these immigrant communities, because this was where the money was. And of course, a lot of the recordings we have from that period were made in America. And we have Tigiria Kula, you can see, Ipokoulas, who ran one of the big record companies in New York. So that's a sort of interesting aside. And we're actually trying to do, we'd like to do, an exhibition on Greek music in America. So look out for it. Yeah. And of course, what George was, George is obsessed with the rebetka. So of course, you know, the rebetka originate in the tekedes of Asia Minor, and they come to Greece, the refugees, and you know, all of this becomes part of Greek musical heritage.
So we've touched on various different topics. You've touched on industry, business deals, the role of women, public health, you know. There's so many different angles, and music, now education, all these different things. I'm sure there's a lot more to say. We don't have all the time, and we'll hope to save something for the exhibit. But what's one thing that touched you most in this exhibit? I'd like to hear from each of you. Eleftheria.
Okay. We mentioned at some point a number, 18,500 orphans, Armenian and Greek orphans. One of the great American relief organizations which arrived in Greece after the Asia Minor catastrophe was the Near East Relief. They were responsible for orphanages, and when the Asia Minor disaster took place, they decided that they wanted to save, to get these orphans under their protection to safer places, and Greece was a safe place. They organized orphanages in various spots around Greece, and they built one of, actually it was the biggest orphanage of the Eastern Mediterranean on the island of Syros. On land given by the Greek government, they built a complex of 15 buildings or something like that, where they housed 7,000 orphans, Armenian and Greek orphans. This place, well, some of these buildings are still standing. And by chance, in one of those buildings, under the wooden floors, there was a great discovery. They, they found pieces of garments, pieces of embroidery, which belonged to orphans, to these Armenian and Greek orphans. And we had several items on display in our exhibition, and we have, especially for you tonight, 3 or 4 items from this display. And at the end of the discussion, you may want to have a better look. I suppose for me this was the most touching part of this exhibition.
Right. And it's over here. Obviously, don't touch when you come over. We don't have the security for it. But Eleftheria and our team will be here so you can talk further. Thank you, Eleftheria. And let's give a round of applause to Eleftheria for beautiful insights and hard work. Andreas, we'll go to you. What's the most touching?
Well, so for me, actually, it was the story of, in different guises of the role that women played. So, I talked to you about Morgenthau. The one I was most moved by were the American women hospitals. And particularly because one of our overseers, who his parents had come to Asia Minor, from Asia Minor to Kokkinia being a very poor neighborhood in Piraeus. His parents were illiterate. His mother, I think, had 13 births. Most of these children died, and he was the only one that was born in a hospital, survived, emigrated to America
in the 50s, became a very successful businessman. And he encouraged us to do this exhibition so that this wouldn't be forgotten. I think for us, one of the great moments was when he came in the summer before we finalized the exhibition, and they showed him pictures. Maria and Eleftheria showed him pictures of what they discovered about these hospitals, and he started telling us stories of growing up in these refugee communities. So that was mine.
Right, a round of applause for Andreas, please. We're going to have questions. We're going to go to questions right after. And Maria?
I think I will stay with the orphans, but I will pick a very interesting and very moving and very touching thing, the Golden Rule Sunday, which was one of the ways in which the Near East Relief wanted to raise money. And it asked American families, normal American people, to give up Sunday lunch once a month and eat what the guys, the orphans ate in the orphanage, and sort of give this money back. We do have an amazing relic from this drive, which really tells you that this was something that moved people so far away to actually give up something to save the kids, to save this.
Thank you, Maria. Let's hear it from Maria. And I'm going to take the liberty to share my story, but you're going to just look. I'll try to find the slide that correlates. There's two reasons why that, to me, when we do this conversation, that really moved me. These are previous exhibits. I don't have the camera in front of me, so I can't see when it's coming up. These are just previous exhibits before I get to it. So we have the Free and the Brave. And these are things come off, so we can actually change them and bring these other various exhibits. This was Hippos, ancient in Athens, and we're going through. But I'm going to just get to my picture. Hold on. That's Samothrace. Here it is. Okay. So the reason why it's important to me is that's my grandmother on the right. So she was a refugee from Asia Minor. This was my family. My grandmother on the tar right, and the sister, my great-grandparents, that left, and I wouldn't be sitting here today, if this story wasn't told, yesterday I shared something about the story that it's about the psychology and understanding. So when I grew up, my yaya we didn't have pictures of Smyrna. She ripped them up. So we're not talking, we shared that last night. It brought tremendous anger for many, many years, never wanted to return. Just couldn't think about it. My mom finally went and they found the house and somebody, where it was, so that's the gold house, they called it. What do you mean the gold house? The lires were in the walls. The men didn't tell the women where the money was, and they found the thing there. She was hidden in a chest when they did the march, so she wouldn't be raped. Mary, was lost for a few days. So that's the story. But the end thing for me is understanding when we talk about refugees and we saw orphans and we saw kids and we saw this and that. This is a painting someone gave me, and I love it. It's called The Immigrant. But to me, it really talks about new birth and new beginning. We think of starting over again. Well, some of them started over at this age. Okay, and to take a look at that is to take a close look at her face and to see, looking forward, looking ahead, some tempered optimism, but probably knowing you're never going back to your homeland. So with that being said, we thank you for joining us tonight, but we want to hear from you now. And I'm going to start with a question for all of you. What is the thing that touched you the most this evening? Thank you. Who wants to? Who would like to? We had some hand raised. If you want to ask some questions. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. I can't even talk because I'm choked up by your story. But the American Women's Hospital, is there any remnants of that left? Did it evolve to a different organization? Is it around?
No.
Is there anything of it?
Right? But you answer.
You mean
You
mean I think like a building or something in Athens?
The organization itself.
No, the records of the organization are at Drexel University. So we have a pretty good idea of what they did, who was there, what they did in terms of.
But it's dissolved since.
No, it doesn't. It's not.
Yeah. Okay. I just didn't know if it maybe got sucked into the Red Cross or anything like that. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Greece was devastated by World War II and the Civil War that followed. And the Americans and the American school played a very big role in humanitarian efforts then. So I'm here to suggest that for your next exhibition, because it's the documentation of that is even greater than it is for this, and it would make a great exhibition.
You're right.
You know, the interesting thing about this,
Microphone.
Sorry. Obviously, the Marshall Plan, you know, it's far more political than this was, which makes it much more difficult to talk about. But I think, you know, we're getting to the point where younger historians are prepared to start looking at that period of Greek history.
When you talk, I'm sorry, I want to add something.
Yeah.
I just thank you, Peter, for bringing that up. You know, just so you know what's going on, we are taking this on the road. However, the school, even though it's built and endowed by Americans and for years operates, it operates a really tight ship. Every nickel, every dollar is there. We're not here to fundraise tonight, but in order to do these types of exhibits and to bring the entire exhibits, we're doing a national sponsorship program, basically to be able to cover the costs of speakers coming in, the travel, the setup, and things like that. So that's something, because once we did it yesterday, everyone said, bring it to my, we wish, we're not here to make money, but we want to tell the story, but we need partners to do that in general. But the exciting part is we've done it in a way that it's not over the top, and we're not doing artifacts. And the best part is, like I said, the fabrics come off and you can replace them with other stories. So that's pretty cool. So we're looking forward to that. And that's the exciting part. Today and last night, these were pilot programs for us. We wanted to see if it took root in people's hearts. Because if the story doesn't touch you, is it really worth traveling? Go ahead.
So I would like to say that the American relief in World War II, before the U.S. got involved, was not political at all. It was heart to heart. It was very emotional. And yeah. And the women who were involved were the same women who were involved in this time period. Ruth Parmalee, for instance. Students at the American school got involved with relief, and one almost died, was really critically injured in Albania in the course of driving an ambulance. And he tried to become part of the Greek army, but he was rejected because they weren't involving people from other nations. And so he became involved in relief work. And it's a long story. The first American school student I know to have gotten involved in relief work was Harriet Boyd in 1897. And she left the school to become a nurse in the Greco-Turkish War.
You're right. No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Long-standing.
Tremendous, tremendous.
And not political at all.
Right.
In these particular
Right.
periods.
Right. I mean, you have, I'm just going to say, I don't want to get into this whole American school thing. You also have Eugene Vanderpool, who was in the Agora, who didn't leave. I was told he didn't leave the Agora, right? And he went he went to Germany, right? Right. As a prisoner.
So the story with Vanderpool is that his wife ran a soup kitchen for Greek children, kept hundreds and hundreds of Greek children alive during the occupation. his wife, who stayed there with their their four kids.
They're buried in the first cemetery of Athens.
Yes.
I've been to their
Yeah.
grave. We're gonna, Dr. Michalopoulos has something to say. I'm gonna give you one analogy that I think pertains. If you ever been to someone's house and you go for like, a weekend, you're a guest. If you stay for a week, you better start putting the dishes in the sink or the dishwasher at least. If you stay for a couple weeks, to walk the dog, do something else. If you stay for 6 months, you better start talking about paying rent. When you're in a place for 143 years, there's a part where you stop being a guest and you're more Greek, and that's what I see with the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. And for those that don't know, I've had the privilege to meet these folks. I tell people when they come visit the school, don't look at the book, don't look at the first printed edition of Homer. Look at Maria when she shows you the book. Look at how they treat the local people and how it's a true passion and love. It's, from our theological father Vasily, it's the agape love. It's the unconditional, pure form of love. Okay, is somebody else wanted to make a comment? Yes, please. Microphone over here. This is excellent. Thank you. This enriches our discussion.
And thank you, because the whole performance tonight has been wonderful. To answer you what was most meaningful. But I have a couple of questions, like questions are being asked, though. One question I think that's so beautiful to me is this poster, the poster of this girl. And if you wouldn't mind speaking a couple of minutes about where did the poster come? Who is she? It was from this country as part of the promotions. That's one of my two questions. Maybe I should just pause and let you answer that first.
You speak about the poster.
By the way, my wife wants a copy of the poster.
The Near East Relief, which was one of the, the American organizations active during this period, they had a number of ways to publicize the needs and the need for funding. The posters was one way. And they were produced, they were actually made by famous American artists during this period. And they helped immensely the goal to raise money.
Beautiful choice in selecting it, by the way.
And as you see, well, you didn't see, but the posters, I think, all of them have kids in them. Either babies or or kids, even if they're by their mother, and obviously it's a campaign that really grabs you.
She also graces the cover of the exhibition catalogs, which will be on. We'll be selling those when we bring the exhibit, hopefully in 2025 here. And we want to create a series of interviews and lectures. Yorgos Topalidis just mentioned, what was his work? What has he done? 3 interviews and stuff?
Yorgos
So this is another
Topalidis
person that might come speak.
was one of our collaborators in this exhibition, and he has worked on the Greeks who came to the United States directly from Turkey. And he has conducted interviews, 300 interviews, I believe, with descendants of sort of second, third generation now. But it's amazing work just to appreciate how these people came together. Community building, fundraising for their homeland, and so on.
You also have Armenia. We had Armin, another gentleman was there with us, a professor last night, who has a photo archive who tells this story of, what was it, the river, and there was the Armenians on the one side, the Greeks on the other. Second question you had?
The second is that when I heard that in the United States, when there was fundraising, that it was done by Protestant churches, that was a little stunning to me, and it's hard to comprehend. Had to comprehend that I didn't hear the word Orthodox churches, which were existing back then. So I'm just wondering, is this really a vacuum? But they must have done something,
No,
Orthodox churches, and also, why would the Protestants have such a feeling for Greece? It's more than the Greeks.
First, remember the theme is basically about saving Christians. On those posters.
Right, so
that's one part of the story. The other is that the Greek community was small, and it was poor, largely, and the sums involved were enormous. So the Greeks did participate, we know that, but the big participation was.
The American public.
Oh, we have a question.
Yeah, this is why I mentioned Boston, because all of this material and archival material is here. But we know that the Greek newspapers of the time, they were running fundraisers and really, again, with the idea, especially around Christmas of 1923, save our brothers. I mean, they're dying. So they did make contributions, obviously.
And Gennadios, too.
Gennadios was traveled, I mean, the founder of the library traveled to America Christmas of 1921, and he was involved in fundraising. He actually translated the letter of Near East Relief into Greek for the Greek community. So they were involved as well, very much.
One more question. Yeah, please, go ahead. No, go ahead. Couple, we'll let it go. Go ahead, yeah. Here we go.
I open my
Bring
big,
it.
I open my big mouth.
Bring it.
One thing is that I wanted to make you all aware of is the speaker series that goes on every year. I believe Admiral Stavridis is one of the speakers. He is a 4-star admiral, and his parents came out of Smyrna in 1922.
And he's just published his book.
And he's an amazing guy. He was vetted by Hillary as a potential vice presidential candidate, and she should have picked him. Pardon?
And also by Harris.
Oh, really? Yeah. He's an amazing guy, and if he's worth seeing.
That's a great, thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to write it down.
But what I didn't understand about the Protestants, were the Protestant missions in Anatolia, or were they in Greece?
The missions were primarily in Anatolia, and
Okay, then I have a correction. The Greeks in Anatolia were very wealthy.
No.
They were not poor.
Oh, no, they were rich and they were poor. I mean, there was a bit of everything, but there were lots of.
That's true, but one of the reasons that the Turks wanted to expel the Greeks and the Armenians and the Jews is that they controlled all the wealth in Turkey. And when they were expelled, there was a huge depression in the Turkish economy because all that brain power left.
I think the point is that there weren't a million rich people. There was a few rich people, but there were many, many poor people that came from the hinterlands of Anatolia. I don't know if you read Greek, Ilias Venezis' book on
Your microphone, because
number, what is that?
Όχι, το Αιωλική γη, Aeolian,
Yeah,
where he describes, one of the Venezis' book, Αιωλική γη, which has been translated now, which
Has
describes.
it been translated? Has it been translated?
Yes, it has. Yeah.
But he was a POW.
He was, but he wrote a book about a fictitious family that's driven from, their farmland, and it's very, very moving story. So.
No, but you bring up an excellent point about the type, for those that don't know, the type of people that were in Asia Minor. My mother taught, my father was from Sparti, and my family, as you saw, was from Asia Minor, and she would tell us all the time, we were not farmers. Your grandmother went to the opera. She spoke several languages. We were culture. You saw them in the photo, and reminded me time and again. I don't know if it was a dig on my dad and his village, or just to remind me. Okay.
But, I mean, the Greek Communist Party. The Greek Communist Party, which was founded by a Bulgarian Jew, but really begins to grow with the tobacco workers that came from Anatolia, who were very poor.
They were poor when they got to Greece because they left everything behind.
I'm talking about the workers. I'm not talking about the tobacco merchants. There were, okay, I understand what you're saying, but the picture that they were all rich is not the case. I mean, But
Not
having said
everybody was
that,
rich. I didn't
having
say
said
that, but-
having said that, the refugees that came to Greece that that were very cosmopolitan, that had factories and things like that, became the backbone of the Greek of the Greek economy, of the industrialization of the Greek economy after the war. So, Papadopoulou, the big biscuits, the Piraiki, Patraiki, the big companies were all Asia Minor Greeks.
And the best restaurants.
Okay, we'll have just one or two more questions. Did somebody raise their hand? We're good? Oh, we have. Anybody else? Oh, you had a question right here.
John, did you have a
Johnny,
question?
we got something.
No.
I thought you were going to say something.
Well, I'll make a comment.
Sure.
The thing that was the most compelling.
Perfect, you're closing it.
The thing that was most compelling to me was the pictures of the children and wondering, what their story was and subsequent story was, and how many of the Greek people that I know, families still have connections back in Greece, and or interesting subsequent stories in their family history.
Well, I do want to say that's what's fascinating as well, because when you start off behind the 8 ball and everything's taken from you and you're not there, how on earth do you how do you go? And another Bostonian that actually was a member of the Board of Overseers for years was Michael Dukakis, right? And I remember this. I remember what he told me one time, because, the one benefactor that Andrea spoke about was a guy that was born there in those conditions and, built an empire and did very well for himself and his family and came from nothing. And Mike Dukakis had told me one time, we were together, and he says, George, they tell me, how amazing was it for me to be a major nominee of a party and the first Greek American to do so. And Snag goes, that's impressive. And he goes, but I don't want to take anything away from that, because I don't want to feel like I'm ungrateful, and it was really good. But that is nothing. Now, whether he was Asia Minor, I don't remember, but his story.
No, he's from Crete.
He was from Crete,
He's
but
from
no, I'm not
Crete,
saying
yeah.
it was. I'm not saying it's Asia Minor. Okay, the Cretan got upset, but he says this though. He goes, but that is nothing compared to my dad, who was, I believe he said, came to America with nothing in his pocket. I think he was 17 or 18 years old. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? And 7 years later or something, crosses Harvard Medical School. He didn't understand, couldn't even read English. I think he's a valedictorian or something, and became a doctor. How on earth could you not read the thing and all of a sudden, that to me was fascinating. So he was Cretan, but those are the stories, and those are the heart of the children of this generation that came out, and many of them, were able to make something. And it's a powerful lesson for our young people that are here today, right? When the story doesn't go as it's supposed to go, it's okay, right? That the life doesn't end, that there's new beginnings, and it's an also story that people will come and help you, and that we should help others too. We thank you for being here tonight. We're going to be around. Have a great evening, and we look forward to talking to you. Thank you, Chrysula. Oh, yeah. We're going to take a group.
My father.
We'd love to have your feedback.
Yeah, for sure.